Hey everybody out there on social media, my name is Matthew Johnson and welcome to Steps to Freedom. We are still currently in our 12-week series on how to go through the 12 steps, and today we're going to be looking at and breaking down step 3 as well as looking at and discussing the principle attached to step 3. So if you do not have yourself a basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous, I urge you, please put this video on pause, go get yourself a copy as well as some pens and highlighters, whatever you need to record this down on or with. Share this with your sponsees, people in recovery, not in recovery. That kind of brings me to my next question. If you could please like and subscribe to this channel. My whole goal, my whole mission is to further the message of recovery and the gospel of Jesus Christ. Yes, I said gospel of Jesus Christ. If you're watching this video for the first time, I am a Christian. I say the same kind of spiel in all my other videos. And if you could do me a favor and just replace the word Jesus with higher power. If you have a problem with Jesus or Christianity, with whatever religion you might be a part of, if you're a part of a religion, Alcoholics Anonymous or a lot of these 12-step fellowships are not religion-based or Christian-based. There are some Christian 12-step fellowships that I highly recommend, like Life Recovery, and you also have Celebrate Recovery. Check those out if you're already a Christian and if you haven't been a part of those. But I am still a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am not representing Alcoholics Anonymous or promoting them necessarily, but I am promoting the 12 steps, and I would never stop being a part of Alcoholics Anonymous because that's where I found God. That's where I was first introduced to the steps, and they are the original for coming up with the 12 steps, and all these other 12-step fellowships, Christian or non-Christian, use the same exact method for the most part. All this stuff does come out of the Bible. I'm not going to go too far into that. You will hear me talking about that stuff, though, all through these videos. So if you have a problem with Christianity or Jesus, please bear with me. I'll be respectful of your higher power if you could be respectful of mine. I always say this as well. I am not a pastor. I am not a spiritual guru. I'm just a simple man in recovery who loves Jesus, who loves recovery, and who is on fire for God and just wants to be a vessel used by God to reach as many of those who are lost, sick, and suffering. I pray for whoever's watching this video that this will help you. If you want to get a hold of me, you can reach me on my email at steps2freedom7@gmail.com. Or you can message me through Messenger. We have a Facebook page as well. I say we because this is your channel. This is just as much as mine. It's your Facebook page as well. So send me messages or comments down below. I'll get back to you. Depending on how many people I have messaging me and emailing me, I'll get to you as soon as I can. So without further ado, my name is Matthew Johnson, and I'm a recovered drug addict and alcoholic. We are going to be opening up to page 59 in your basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. And on page 59, you're going to have the 12 steps. And the reason why I opened up to page 59 is to lay some groundwork on what we're going to be discussing and breaking it down just a little bit to give you a better idea of what we're going into and to talk about the principle attached to that step. So if we go to step 3, it says, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. So the main thing to start looking at is decision. This is where we actually make a decision. It's not so much of where action is taking place. That's actually taking place in step 4 when we do moral inventory, when we have to put a pen or pencil to the paper and get real with ourselves. But here we have to make a decision. Are we going to be all in for God, for whatever higher power or religion, if you are a part of one? but are we going to be all in for recovery? All right. So you have to make that decision. Am I all in or am I all out? Am I hot or am I cold? All right. And if you are struggling with this and you're like, well, I don't want to go to meetings every day, or I'm not going to work all the 12 steps, or I'm not going to sponsor, then you're probably not going to stay sober. That's the realization of this. But you have to turn your will in your life. And I always heard that, but I never really knew what it meant until it was simplified, because for me, things have to be very simple. Um, it means to turn your thoughts and your actions over to the care of God as you understand Him. So I didn't know how to really turn my thoughts and actions over. And a part of me, just throwing this out through my experience, is I had to change everything. I even changed the music I listened to when I became a Christian. Because am I going to be putting stuff that's full of positivity or negativity in my life? There is some secular music I still listen to today, but it better be positive. I'm done listening to that murder rap and that horrible, disgusting, filthy music, because it's doing nothing but molding me on the inside to become rotten and disgusting. And for the longest time, I didn't realize whatever happened in the physical happens in the spiritual. And I truly believe that. So if you're putting nothing but disgusting movies and music in your eyes and ears, that's what you're shaping your spirit to be. You're either going to build your spirit up to be healthy, or you're going to not build it up and you're going to let it decay and rot because of what you feed it. So just to throw that out there. And then it's to the God of your understanding. If you're not a Christian, that's okay. You can believe in whatever you want to believe in, but it has to be a power greater than yourself that you can form a relationship with. Okay? So, with that being said, let's get into the principle attached to step 3, and that principle is surrender. I had to surrender to God, to the program of recovery, to work in these 12 steps, to getting a home group and commitments inside that home group and sponsoring others, going to meetings, showing up and really getting involved, not just sitting in the back, but sitting in the front and really being serious about this. This is life and death. It's not playing around, but I had to fight, right? But the way I fight is through surrendering, okay? I just conform to this stuff and God fights my disease and my battles for me. I just have to show up. And whenever He tells me to do something, I do it. And 9 times out of 10, everything always works out. I should say 10 times out of 10. It all works out. It will, at least for me so far through my experience. So with that being said, we are going to go to page 58. It's only the page before it. And this is chapter 5, how it works. So we are going to be reading the readings that's actually read inside some of these fellowships. Typically, it's only going to be Alcoholics Anonymous because this is their book. And so they read this because this is how it works. This sums up the program on what you have to do. The 12 steps are on the page and so forth. So it says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Notice the word rarely. That actually used to say never. When Bill Wilson was writing this, him and the first 100 men and women, he actually put in never, and everybody, to my knowledge, feel free to disregard if this is not 100%, but this is what I've acquired. It's actually said never. And they had a problem with it, and so he actually went and changed it because a lot of the language he was writing in it was very like, you have to do this or else. This is a must. This is not a suggestion. You have to do it. And being addicts and alcoholics, we don't like to be told what to do. So they said, let's make it a little bit softer. And I think they should have left it the way it was, because nowadays we're making everything so soft and it has to be accommodating for everybody or we get offended. And, I'm sorry to say, if the truth offends you, then be offended. But someone has to speak truth, because if we all stop speaking truth and what we really believe in that is true, then eventually it's just going to be all watered down and no one's going to know the truth and we're all going to be lost. and no one's going to ever be the leader and to lead people, through these hard times. So it says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Well, thoroughly, how do we thoroughly follow their path? By doing what it says in the book. Working the 12 steps, getting a home group, commitments in the home group, sponsoring, giving back, going to meetings, all that kind of stuff. And this is their path. It's not the people in the rooms nowadays. It's talking about the people who wrote the book. I want what they have, not with whoever Joe Schmo type of recovery he has. I mean, I do if it lines up with the book, but other than that, I only want to do what is outlined in this book and listen to those who gave the path before me. Then it goes on to say, those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. So I actually have my sponsees cross out cannot, because the majority of them, or all of them that I've ever worked with, if they don't do this program, it's the fact that they will not. The cannots are people who actually have like a mental disability, maybe have bipolar 1 or schizophrenia, something that actually prohibits them from understanding this message fully. And the people I work with, I always, can tell that they can understand this. It's the fact that they will not do this work. And then it says people who do not recover, or people who cannot, will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They have seemed to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. So working the 12 steps and living by these Christian or spiritual principles is a way of life. It's a manner of living. So it's, people get hung up on, you got to do the step a certain way, you have to have a certain amount of time of sobriety. That is not true. I've actually had people come into the rooms, these 12-step fellowships, and have already been working the steps, these spiritual principles, and they didn't even know it. And they were actually staying sober. And this is why they actually didn't start the 12 steps with a real sponsor, but they had no idea they were working the stuff. So it's a manner of living. AA or any 12-step fellowship does not have a monopoly saying you can only stay sober if you go through this way. It's just the most effective. And so people recommend that, but people can get sober in the church or other religions or just being spiritual. It's about being honest, open-minded, willing, surrendering, having humility. You combine all these things and you go and live a life, and that mental obsession goes away. That's what I've come to find out that works. So, then it goes on to say, talking about rigorous honesty. Again, it talks about the word honesty and 3 times in this paragraph. And if you are not being honest, you're not going to stay sober. From my experience, I had to have rigorous honesty, and that's why in my prior video in step 1, I talk about having to be honest with yourself, God, the people around you, and especially your sponsor, because if you're not, no one can help you. So if you're not being honest, and part of being honest is showing up and doing what is outlined. If you're not working these steps and having a home group and all that kind of stuff, then you're not being honest, because you're not falling in line with the way the program is outlining, and the chances of you staying sober drop dramatically. So then it goes on to talk about those who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. And you're going to see the word if all throughout this book. And I have my sponsees circle that, because that is a choice. That is a fork in the middle of the road. You're either all in or you're all out. And many of people with mental illness, if they go along with this program, most of them can get this. They just have to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. So this right here is the format for where we're given a speaker meeting. Okay, so a speaker is supposed to stand up there, give their name, sobriety date, and stay on that topic on what they used to be like, what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like now. Here it uses the word we because the first 100 men and women who wrote the book wrote it together, so it's plural, but you're going to make it singular and make it what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like now. And just to give you a little insight into this, I find that the majority of all speakers, when they stand up at an average speaker meeting, do not use the word I. They use the word it, which changes the whole context if you really look at it. Because if I stand up there and I say what it used to be like, what happened, and what it's like now, it's a lot different than saying what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like now, in the sense of I am selfish, dishonest, self-seeking. I'm very manipulative. I'm taking accountability and I'm showing that I'm the one that has the problem. I have the disease. Okay? When I use the word it is deflecting and onto whatever else. Okay, it sucked. It was the problem. The people, the police, the authorities, all that was the problem, not me. So there's a big difference from it and I. It sucked. I was selfish. Okay? So make sure when you're at a speaker meeting, listen to that, not to cause any resentment, but just to show how many people know the literature. And I've heard some people say the word it instead of I, and they stayed on topic and they showed the problem but brought the solution. So remember, at these meetings, you'll hear a lot of people talk about the problem more than the solution. We want to identify, all right, give our experience, strength, and hope, and the outline of the allergy, the mental obsession, the spiritual condition, and show what happened and then how we got the solution. Because everybody knows how to get drunk and high, but not everybody knows how to stay sober and to help others get sober. So that's what we want to stay on. A lot of these speakers, you'll hear them talk for like 50 minutes about the problem, and then the last 5-10 minutes talk about very briefly. Well, then I came into this 12-step fellowship and I got a sponsor. I got a home group and a commitment. And then I worked the 12 steps and I stayed sober and I sponsor and I have a nice car and a beautiful wife or husband and a good house and children. And then that's it. So again, we want to talk about the problem just a little bit so people can identify and relate, but then we want to get the rest of it, the solution on how to stay sober and connect and grow in spirituality. So then after that, it goes on to say, if you decide you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. Now, are you willing to go to any lengths? That's why you hear me in my prior videos say, feel free to disregard anything that does not line up with the big book or basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because just like with the Bible, if it goes against Scripture and I'm saying stuff just out of opinion, I have to be careful and I got to make sure that, hey, this is my experience, strength, and hope, my opinions in there, but this is the fact of what it says, and let you make up your decision on what's true and what's fact by the literature, by the text. So remember that, okay? Are you willing to go to any length that the 12 steps and the whole program of whatever 12-step fellowship you are in? Are you willing to do that? And everybody in the beginning says, yes, I'm willing to do that. And then you throw them a 4-step and you tell them to pray and meditate and to 10-step and then go sponsor. And they don't want to do it. They want to pick and choose. Or even you make suggestions saying, hey, I think you should leave that person alone that's new in recovery. Or you should stay living in sober living because your chances of staying sober are dramatically higher and increase when you stay in those environments. And 9 times out of 10 that they don't, and they leave and they relapse, and then they wonder why they're not staying sober, because they really weren't willing to go to any lengths. Their mouth was moving, but their actions showed otherwise. Okay? So then it goes on to say, at some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. A lot of people say to be fearless and thorough, that it takes a long time. Like, oh, I got to be very thorough on my 4th step. That's why it's going to take me several months or even a year or multiple years to do it. That is not true. You can be fearless and thorough and honest in a very, very short period of time, depending if you're actually doing what this says or not. Look at all my videos. Look how quick all this stuff is. You just take the meat and potatoes out of it. So if you have a really good sponsor, he's going to be able to show you in a very short amount of time, very exact and precise ways and thorough ways to go through these steps and to help you stay sober and connect with your higher power. Okay, so just remember that that is totally a lie. You can be very fearless, honest, and thorough in a very short period of time. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. So trying to manipulate and hold on to things that we want. Remember, we're dealing with alcohol or drugs. Cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. So I have my sponsees cross out the word alcohol and write mental obsession. That, remember, we're dealing with the mental obsession, this delusion or illusion, that is cunning, baffling, and powerful. So I have them do that because alcohol and drugs is not a problem for me anymore. I'm around alcohol all the time. You know, even at my job, I have to make drinks for the people in the morning. You know, I'm a cook at a restaurant, and so you know, some people want to have mimosas or little things around noontime that I have to prepare that. I used to be an alcoholic. I'm not going to run from it, but I made sure that I went through these 12 steps and I have a relationship with my higher power of Jesus, and I'm spiritually fit. I'm physically fit as well. I can handle the task of doing that without having that mental obsession in my mind. So alcohol now is powerless. Drugs now are powerless, even though I respect them. And it talks about in the literature that as long as we're spiritually fit, we can go anywhere as free men. You know, providing that our motives are pure and that we're going there for a good, valid reason. If I'm showing up at a bar with all my old drinking buddies and ordering a Coke and saying, hey, look at me, guys, I'm staying sober, the chances of me staying sober drop dramatically, and that shows that I'm probably not as spiritually fit as I think I am because I'm full of pride and ego and selfish tendencies. So just to throw that out there as well, that alcohol and drugs now are powerless. I respect them, but they have no power over me anymore. And then it says, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. So if the only thing that can remove the mental obsession for a drinking drug or whatever you might be dealing with is God, how am I supposed to find him? Through the 12 steps. Do you see why the 12 steps are so important? And when am I supposed to find them? Now. Okay? So when am I supposed to start working the 12 steps? Now. So when you hear these people in these 12-step fellowships saying, oh, you take your time with the steps, or, you know, we're going to get into that first. I want you to do 90 meetings in 90 days first, which it doesn't say that in the book anywhere. Then that is a big problem because it's saying here in the literature, in how it works, that you need to find God, that he's the only one that can remove that mental obsession, that has all power. And so you find him the most efficient and easiest way through the 12 steps, and then maintenance that through steps 10, 11, and give him back sponsoring in step 12. Okay, then it says, half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection with care and complete abandon. And then it says, here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. And just to throw this out, the word suggested, or you see the word must all through the book, is subtle commands. Just like I will make a suggestion if you go skydiving that you wear the parachute and that you pull the ripcord when you get closer to the ground. If you don't, sadly to say, you are probably going to die. And it's the same thing in recovery. We suggest that you work the 12 steps, get a home group, commitments, carry the message, and go to meetings. But if you don't, that is your choice, and the chances of you staying sober drop dramatically and could even lead to death. So those suggestions and musts are actually warnings and subtle commands. Okay? Then it goes on to talk about the 12 steps, which I'm not going to read. I urge you to read them. We talked about step 3, which is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And that's what we're going through right now. Then it gets, as we go over to the next page, on page 60, it says, many of us exclaimed, what an order. I can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. So, you'll hear this all the time in these rooms saying that we are not saints, and we don't want to use any of this language and dialogue and content to justify our behavior, but we do want to not beat ourselves up. So if we are honest, there's that key word, honest with ourselves, we can see that we don't have to be perfect, that we, as long as we're being honest and doing this work to the best of our ability, we can make mistakes. That is okay. But we are wanting to grow along spiritual lines, okay? And so these principles like honesty, surrender, hope, humility, love, all this stuff, right, are guides to progress, okay? So just understand that we want to do our best to be honest. We want to do our best to be humble and to be selfless. And as long as we're doing our absolute best, that we're sure we're going to stay sober and remain spiritually fit. But the more we fall short of that, and especially if we don't care, then we can start getting sick again spiritually. And then it can actually lead into physically being sick as well. And we want to try to avoid that. Then it goes down to say our description of the alcoholic or drug addict, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. Then you're going to see where it says A, B, C, and it's going to say a sentence after each one of those, and this is known as the ABCs. So if you're ever hearing someone in the rooms of AA talk about the ABCs, this is what they're talking about on page 60. It says A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, step 1, right? B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism, okay, so like step 2. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. And then step 3. And notice that it talks, it says the word if, all right? So again, if is a decision, it's a choice, it's a fork in the road, that God would help us, right, if we sought him, all right? And how do we do that? Well, the most efficient way, through the 12 steps. Then it goes on to say, being convinced, we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Again, will means thoughts, actions is life, okay? So will is our thoughts, life is our actions. Over to God as we understood him. But what do we mean by that? And just what do we have to do? The first requirement is that we have to be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody. Even though our motives are good, most people will try to live by self-propulsion. So we have to understand that if you're like me, my life has been turning out so good. I've been in jails, institutions, I've been homeless, I can't keep jobs. Everybody I come in contact with doesn't want to come in contact with me anymore, that I'm actually like a leper and I'm banished from my community and society because I cannot function. And it's because of the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction that I have. So now I have to just give everything up. And that's why if I just walk into these rooms and show up, right, and do what I'm told, as long as it lines up with the book, and do that action, that after a while I start to see what really is God's will and what's my will. And I can be like, okay, I know I shouldn't be doing that. Let me line it up with God's will. And I can go down this windy path, but still line my will up with God's. and remain safe and protected in his care. But it takes a lifetime process. But the sooner you start the process by working the steps and getting a home group, commitments, and so forth, the sooner I can start getting well, okay? And a lot of this stuff I'm repeating, it's all repetitive because in steps 1, 2, 3, all the way to 12, it's all the same thing. Everything ties together when you really break it down and separate it. So then it goes on to say the story about the actor. Okay, so this is a story about an actor. It's just a demonstration. It's not a true story, even though it definitely is my story, and it's probably yours. Even if you're not an addict or an alcoholic and have this disease, you probably can relate to it as well. But I just want to paint a little picture, give some groundwork that what does an actor do? An actor acts. It reads the script that was given to him or her by the director. Okay, he doesn't do anything else. You know, nowadays in Hollywood, you do have actors that are directors, but disregard that. We are staying on course with, you know, the director directs and has everyone else line everything up with his will of how he wants the production or movie to be. And the actors just act and play their part. And then you have everyone else that is involved in the theater or the movie production as well to do their own part, to do the lights, and props and dress and makeup and all that kind of stuff. And when everyone works together, the body of Christ or the body of recovery, that everything flows and God can work and do his will on what needs to be done. So with that being said, if you are sponsoring, this is a really good way to read and actually put your sponsee's name actually in, so it becomes more personal. I know that was done for me, and I do it with my sponsees, so that way it paints a better picture of them being able to relate to it. And I know I'm so selfish. When I hear my name involved in something or I'm asked questions, it gets me to interact and be involved, and it makes me listen and pay attention actually more. So I use that technique with my sponsees as well. So again, we're on page, the bottom of page 60, and it talks about each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, and the scenery, and the rest of the players in his or her own way. If his or her arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as they wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including themselves, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful, and trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He or she may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he or she may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he or she is more likely to have varied traits. What usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. He or she begins to think life doesn't treat them right. They decide to exert themselves more. They become, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit them. Admitting that they may be somewhat at fault, he or she is sure that other people are more to blame. They become angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is their basic trouble? Are they not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Are they not a victim of the delusion that they can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if they only manage well? It is not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things that they want? And do their actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he or she not, even in their best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. They are like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation, the minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century, politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave, the outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged them, and the alcoholic or drug addict who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations Are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, or our self-pity? So that is the whole breakdown of the story of the actor. Hopefully, you're looking at it and relating to it. I know I definitely can relate to that. Then it goes on the top of page 62, to talk about selfishness and self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. So it's not the drugs and alcohol or whatever it might be for you. That is not that anymore. It's our mind. It's the disease of the mind, the mental obsession, this delusion or illusion that makes me believe that I can do whatever safely and successfully when I cannot, because I've tried it over and over. So just remember that. Me being an alcoholic, I know I can't drink, or a drug addict, I can't put drugs in me, but I have to take care of myself spiritually, or I will do those things. So then it goes on to talk about driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. So if selfishness and self-centeredness is our problem, okay, and we're driven by 100 forms of fear, I would say thousands of forms of fear, then it shows us that our life has been nothing but negative, that we have been controlled by fear and selfishness. So how do we get rid of that? Through the 12 steps and through God, through this lifetime process. And I want you to look at where it says driven by 100 forms of fear. I'm going to give a demonstration of a police officer representing fear, okay? And a police officer, especially for all my convicts out there, a police officer comes in front of you, all right, says you're doing something wrong, puts you in handcuffs, puts you in the back of the cop car, and takes you to the police station. Now you're going to go wherever that police officer takes you. That police officer arrested you. That fear arrested you and now is controlling you. And you're going to do whatever that fear says. It's going to control your job, your life, your relationships, the person you are or become, the future person. And if you lived in the past, it's going to, change you, and you're going to become that past person. Fear is an evil, corroding, element, negativity, that it just ruins all aspects of your life. And I didn't even know it. I had no idea that I was being controlled by fear to an extent of that I was making decisions that were not good for me because of fear. And hopefully that made sense. I got a little stuck on that a little bit. But then it goes on to talk about sometimes they hurt us seamlessly without provocation, but we're invariably find that at some time in the past we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. Same thing I talked about. Okay, and a good way to look at this is fear is negative. God, love is positive. Okay? So you're either going to be controlled by Satan, the devil, negativity, whatever you want to call it, or you're going to be controlled by God, which is positivity, which is love, and so forth. Okay? So the more we live by spiritual principles in the sense of honesty, open-mindedness, love, things of that nature, that's what we're going to get, blessings. And if we go by dishonest, hate, selfishness, we're going to get those consequences, which are not very good consequences, okay, or negativity. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic or drug addict is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics or drug addicts must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And then it goes on to say, and there are often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. This is the how and why of it. First, we had to quit playing God. It did not work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is our principal. We are his agents. He is the father. We are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch, though which we passed to freedom. So again, it goes on to say we're going to let God direct us. We're going to be the actor. Whatever he tells us to do, we do. And so that's why I hope you're doing a lot of prayer meditation. Even though you're on step 3, you should be doing that stuff already. You should be reading the Word of God, reading the AA literature, whatever 12-step fellowship literature you have. Anything that can seek, okay? As long as you're seeking God, he's going to reveal himself more to you. But you have to put the action into seek. And, that's why these steps are so important, because you're constantly seeking God. And then you'll eventually get a foundation which is so strong that you can see, oh, wow, I'm really in a good area. And then you just love seeking God. You love doing this 12-step work and going beyond that. At least that was my experience. All right, so then just the last thing to throw out there, in my last prior videos, I was talking about how they had Freemasonry terms, not the secret society, but the block layers, concrete guys, that they started off with the foundation, that's representing step 1. Then step 2 has the cornerstone, which is the first block when you actually build your building or foundation, build onto your foundation. And then it goes onto the triumphant arch with the keystone. And the keystone actually holds in place the arch, which is our body, our temple, that God can now come dwell in. But we have to make sure that that's all cleaned up and everything. And that's why we do the moral inventory in step 4, which we're going to be discussing next week, on how to make sure that's all cleaned out so we have connection so God can work in us and through us. Okay? So then on the page, top of 63, it says, when we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. So now we have a new employer. But before we can have that employer, we have to sign a contract. So remember, whatever happens in the physical happens in the spiritual. You hear me talk about that all the time. And the reason why is because look at this, like you have the best employer, the best job opportunity ever in the world, that you're going to be making 7 figures. You're going to be a multi-millionaire from this job. But before you have this job, you meet with the CEO and he gives you a contract and says, these are the things that you must do and cannot break. You cannot violate these laws, okay? And these are the ones that you must do as well, but you can mess up on, okay? And once that is in place, you read what is agreed upon, you sign the contract. You better uphold your end of the bargain, because if not, you're going to get fired. Now, it's one thing to be fired in the physical realm by just an average employee, even though it might be the job of a lifetime. You would be okay. But in the spiritual realm, for the alcoholic or drug addict, or whatever it might be for you, to be fired by God is not just like being fired by an average person. That means you're not doing what God is saying to do. He's trying to work with you, but you refuse. So he has to let you make your own decision, your own free will, because he loves you so much that you have to unfortunately relapse, most likely. And so, or at least get so much spirituality sickness that you're miserable. If you didn't relapse, you were probably wishing to. And then until you can come back to him. And the only difference is he actually would rehire you again if you didn't die from alcoholism or drug addiction, and give you another chance. But you have to be willing. So I always stop here and ask the guys I work with, make sure this is really what you want. Make sure you know without a shadow of a doubt that you're going to be all in for recovery. Because if you're not willing to do all 12 steps, moral inventory, prayer, meditation, sponsor when you're all done with the steps, or help others while you're still going through the steps and have a home group, commitments, all that kind of stuff, go to meetings, then you're not ready. And don't waste your time and especially other people's time. Because I know my time is very valuable, and I don't like taking sponsees on anymore if they're not serious. Because this is the program. This is a program for people who want it, not need it. You know, even though people might need it as well, I know I need it. I had to really want it first before I actually understood that I needed it. So, you know, he provided what we needed. Not always he gives us what we want. I come to find out the more I line my will up and do what my Father says, the more he actually gives me what I want as well as what I need. So you might only get ramen noodle soup. You might not get steak and lobster every night. You might be on a budget, but he's going to give you what you need. You might not have the best means of transportation. You might have to be taking the bus or have a bicycle instead of a Ferrari or even just a little junky car. You know, and I had to understand that. You know, I might be living in sober living or a little efficiency apartment for years before I might get, you know, a nice little home I could rent. I might not even own, you know, and I'm okay with that because I know I'm going to stay sober through it all as long as I keep on with this 12-step work and carrying the gospel of, you know, Jesus Christ. So then again, it says the word if, you know, if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Well, how do we keep close to him and perform his work well? Through the 12 steps, having a home group, carrying the message. I'm repeating this stuff so much because I want to ingrain it in your mind of this is the whole program. But that's how we keep close to him, by furthering the message of recovery, furthering the gospel, reading the word, you know, reading the Bible, all that kind of stuff, okay? And then it goes on to, right below that, it's going to be talking about the third step promises. Now, I've said this in my prior videos, that every step has a promise, and there's also promises outside of those steps. And there's also warnings and consequences if you don't do this work. So this is the third step promise. This sometimes happens at once, or it could be, you know, several days, weeks, months. It's on God's timing, so I can't say when it happens. I didn't really even notice when it happened for me. But just be aware of that this will come true if you do exactly what this says. And it says, established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves. Our little plans and designs, more and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. And then it goes on to say we're reborn. So if you notice that, it's the same language that they use in the Bible, becoming a new creature in Christ, being reborn, being baptized in the sense of having this whole new relationship with God and hopefully psychic change, this new change of personality, spiritual awakening. All right, so after that, it goes on to the third step, prayer, which you actually should be doing with your sponsees. You know, the way, to my knowledge, that Bill W. and all them did it, where they actually got on their knees and held each other's hands, and the sponsor read or said this prayer out loud, and the sponsee repeated it after him, word by word, which we're going to do, just not on our hands. I mean, our knees and our hands, holding hands and all that. Obviously, we cannot do that. But I urge you, make sure you do it the way that they did it before us. And it's just awesome. It's really cool. I've had really cool experiences by doing this in like Starbucks or at hospitals or rehabs. And it's funny because I've actually had some sponsees be like, oh, I'm not doing it. They were so prideful. But yet I'm like, dude, you got a grocery bag full of your little clothes that are all bloodstained and you stink and your hair and beard's all out down. You're worried about your appearance, and you're homeless with no money, no job or nothing, but you're not humble enough. You're so prideful that you're not going to get on your knees and do this that could save your life. So that shows me, obviously, you're not willing to do this work, and I'll refuse. If you're not going to do that, unless you have some kind of medical condition, that I won't work with you. I'll be like, man, you're really not willing, But that's just my opinion and my experience with it. So before I read that, I want to jump down to the last paragraph right here. And it says, we found it very desirable. So find that. Just because I feel like this should have been above the third step prayer, because it kind of gives an outline of what to look for and how to take this step. And are you ready to take this step? So I'm going to read that first, and then we'll do the third step prayer. It says, we found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. Notice spiritual advisor it's not saying sponsor. They don't say sponsor anywhere in the book, at least in the first 164 pages, to my knowledge. It says spiritual advisor, okay? So just pointing that out, fun fact. So, but it is better to meet God alone than with someone who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional as long as it was expressed, the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. So again, to sum everything up, you should be taking the step with an understanding person. Hopefully it's just your sponsor. Back then they did it with, wives and all that kind of stuff. Someone that has to understand this. What better person to understand that your condition, the disease of addiction, alcoholism, or whatever it is, than someone who's been through it or recovered from it. So suggestion, sponsor. And then, it doesn't even you don't even have to read the third step prayer. It could be something similar as long as it's expressing the same content of what you're doing, saying you're turning your thoughts and your life over to you, God. It's, in other words, in the Christian terms, you're accepting Jesus in your heart and saying that I'm pledging allegiance to you and going to follow you instead of Satan, instead of the enemy. So replace that with whatever dialogue you want to for yourself, if you have any. But then we're going into the third step prayer. So again, go up to where it says God in quotes. Okay, and you can repeat this with your sponsees. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me, to do with me as thy wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those. I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. And then it says, we thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready and that we can at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. So if you haven't turned your will and your life over to your higher power, which is hopefully Jesus, I urge you to do that. If you haven't done the steps before this, I suggest that you go and get a sponsor. I know I said I'm your temporary sponsor in the prior videos, which I definitely can be. Even if you have a sponsor, I urge you to watch these videos, share this with your sponsor. But yeah, man, get into the trenches in recovery. Go help those sick and suffering. First, you got to help yourself with going through the rest of these steps, and let it change your life. Let God change your life. I know he did me. He took me from hopeless to hopeful. And I'm just so ecstatic, and that's why I do these videos. I don't ask for money or donations or anything. It's all my own, resources and time I sacrifice, because I think it is important to make sure that this stuff is getting out there and not being watered down. So hopefully you enjoyed the video and learned something. Hopefully one soul was touched or saved. Again, if you do not mind, if you could please like, subscribe, and share this video and all my other prior videos with as many people in recovery or not in recovery as possible. That would be greatly appreciated. If you want to get a hold of me, again, you can reach me on my email at steps, the number 2, step3freedom7@gmail.com, or find us on our Facebook page. You can message me on Messenger, leave comments down below. I will get back to you as quick as I can, depending on how many people are messaging me and emailing me. And just know, man, it's all about God. It's all about a lifestyle, and so if you're willing to do that, I hope to see you in these rooms, and I wish you the best. So if no one told you that they loved you today, just know that Jesus does, and so do I. God bless everybody.